Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're returning to Texarkana, not to revisit the attacks themselves, but to examine the pattern behind them and what modern criminal profiling can tell us about the Phantom Killer.
Exactly.
You know, whenever we start to unpack these historical mysteries, I always find myself thinking about the inescapable reality of human habit.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you probably take the exact same route to work every single morning. You probably sit in the exact same spot on your couch every evening. We're just, creatures of routine.
Right. Our brains are wired for it.
Yeah. But imagine for a second that your routine, your habit, is hunting human beings. How does a subconscious need for repetition end up becoming the very thing that betrays someone who is, frankly, trying to remain a phantom?
Well, that is the fundamental vulnerability of every serial offender. I mean, while their conscious mind is entirely focused on evasion, wiping away fingerprints, avoiding streetlights, escaping into the tree line, their subconscious is essentially running a rigid software program.
Software program.
Yeah. They are driven to fulfill highly specific emotional or psychological needs. Physical evidence degrades over time. A footprint washes away in the rain.
A stray hair gets lost to the wind.
Exactly. But that psychological signature, the malicious code their brain runs to achieve a specific emotional output, that survives. It is a behavioral algorithm that they just cannot help but execute over and over again.
And that algorithm is exactly what we want to isolate today. We have this really rare opportunity to look back at the 1946 Phantom Killer case, not as a collection of ghost stories, but as a rigid set of data points.
Which is how you have to look at it to find the truth.
Right. The goal of our examination isn't just to recite what happened in Texarkana. We want to take these events from the 1940s, strip away the media hysteria, and just feed them into our modern understanding of behavioral pattern analysis.
Yeah, we want to figure out what this killer's micro-decisions actually tell us about the architecture of their mind.
So to map out that architecture, I guess we have to establish the chronology. You can't see the algorithm without first observing the output.
No, you can't. We need to meticulously walk through the 10-week period in the spring of 1946 across the Twin Cities of Texarkana, which, straddle the Texas and Arkansas border.
Yeah, we need to look at how the offender's psychological needs evolved. So let's look at the first output. Attack number 1.
February 22, 1946.
Right. Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean LeRae. They are parked in a secluded area on a secluded lover's lane. The assailant attacks. Jimmy Hollis suffers a fractured skull from blunt force trauma.
And Mary Jean LeRae is sexually assaulted.
Right. Both survive, thankfully. But the detail that always stops you, the thing I always get hung up on, is the visual.
A mask.
The mask, yeah. The attacker's wearing a makeshift white pillowcase mask with eye holes cut out of it. And I want to pause here because I really struggle with this detail.
How so?
Well, a pillowcase mask seems terrifying, yes, but practically speaking, it sounds like a tactical nightmare.
It really is.
I mean, it shifts around, it limits your peripheral vision, it compromises your hearing. Why would an offender handicap themselves like that during a physical assault?
It's a brilliant question, honestly, and it gets to the absolute core of behavioral analysis. You are absolutely right. A makeshift cloth mask is a massive tactical liability in a physical struggle.
It's just asking to get pulled off.
Exactly. The fact that the offender chose to wear it tells us that the psychological payoff of the mask heavily outweighed the physical disadvantage.
Interesting.
Psychologically, a mask like that is a tool of profound dehumanization. For the offender, it removes their own identity, allowing them to detach from the moral weight of their actions.
It turns a man into a monster.
Precisely. And for the victims, it induces a paralyzing primal terror. The offender is sacrificing sensory input because what they desperately need, the core of their psychological algorithm, is to see absolute, unadulterated fear in the eyes of their victims.
Wow. So the mask isn't just to hide his face from the police. It's to amplify his own power in that specific moment. He needs to be a monster.
Yeah, it's about control. And that level of preparation, you don't just happen to have a custom-cut pillowcase in your jacket pocket when you go for an evening walk.
No, you definitely don't.
It demonstrates a very high degree of premeditation. This individual woke up that day, procured the pillowcase, cut the holes, and left their home with the explicit, conscious intention of hunting.
So this was not a bar fight that got out of hand.
No, not at all. It was a planned expedition.
But if it was a planned expedition, it was also, from the killer's perspective anyway, a messy one.
Very messy.
Both victims survived. The physical struggle was chaotic. Which makes me wonder if that chaos is exactly what drove the massive shift we see in the very next attack.
It's highly likely.
Because if attack 1 was about testing the waters of control with a physical struggle, what happens to an offender's psychology when that physical struggle proves too difficult or too risky?
They adapt.
They adapt, yeah. And that adaptation is what makes the scene on March 24 entirely different.
Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore.
Right. Found dead in a parked car on a secluded dirt road. The blunt force trauma is gone. The physical struggle is entirely gone. Both of them were shot in the back of the head with a .32 caliber revolver.
It's a massive leap.
The leap in violence here is staggering. I mean, going from a club to a gun.
It is a textbook, albeit terrifying, example of offender escalation through methodology refinement. Think about the feedback loop the offender experienced after the first attack.
Right, he wanted total control.
He wanted control, but he got a chaotic physical struggle where the victim survived. His algorithm failed to execute perfectly.
So he upgrades his tools.
Exactly. The introduction of a firearm changes the dynamic entirely. A .32 caliber revolver provides ultimate sterile distance.
It eliminates the need to overpower someone physically.
Yeah. The fact that they were both shot in the back of the head is highly significant. It tells us there was no struggle. It was an execution.
It almost feels like a totally different offender.
Right.
Going from a messy, intimate assault to a cold, detached, double execution.
It does feel different, I agree. But the underlying drive, that need for absolute control in a secluded environment, remains identical.
He just figured out a better way to get it.
Sadly, yes. The offender realized that physical strength wasn't enough to guarantee dominance, so he substituted physical strength with a firearm. He's becoming more efficient, more lethal, and tragically more confident in his ability to orchestrate these encounters.
And that confidence metastasizes by the time we reach attack number 3.
April 14th.
April 14th, yeah. Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, 2 teenagers. They are found in Spring Lake Park on the Texas side. And here we see a horrific amalgamation of the first 2 attacks.
We really do.
We have the sexual violence of the first attack, the lethal firearm execution of the second, but now we have the introduction of prolonged torture.
Which is a very dark turn.
The timeline of this attack is stretched out. The sheer audacity to take your time with victims in a known public park, it's just chilling.
When an offender introduces torture, we have to look really closely at what that means mechanically and psychologically. Torture requires time. Right.
It requires an environment where the offender feels completely secure from interruption. Spring Lake Park was a known area, not a totally obscure dirt road.
It was the place people actually went to.
Exactly. The fact that he was comfortable operating within this environment, taking his time to inflict pain and then vanishing, represents an apex of dark confidence. He's no longer just hunting, he is savoring the hunt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The compulsion has grown so severe that a quick execution is no longer enough to satisfy the psychological urge. He needs to prolong their suffering to maximize his feeling of omnipotence.
Which makes the events of May 3 so incredibly confusing to me. Attack number 4. Virgil and Katie Starks.
The anomaly.
Right. Everything we just established about the killer's algorithm completely fractures here. I mean, they are not teenagers parked in a lover's lane.
No, they are a married couple.
Sitting in their own living room at an isolated Miller County farmhouse on the Arkansas side, Virgil is just reading the newspaper, and he is suddenly shot through a closed window from the darkness outside.
This is completely out of nowhere. The attacker then fires at Katie, hitting her twice in the face, but she miraculously manages to run out of the house and flag down a neighbor. I look at this and I honestly can't reconcile it.
It's difficult to make sense of.
Firing a gun through a pane of glass from outside a house is the exact opposite of the close quarters, intimate dominance he was seeking in Spring Lake Park.
You are identifying the exact anomaly that has divided criminologists for decades. In behavioral analysis, an offender's modus operandi, their MO, can evolve, as we saw from the first to the second attack.
Right, upgrading the weapon.
Exactly. But it rarely fractures this completely. Moving from hunting vulnerable teenagers in isolated cars to launching a home invasion against a married couple in a fortified structure requires a fundamentally different psychological drive.
That's like night and day.
Furthermore, firing through a window is a deeply detached, almost cowardly method of killing compared to the terrifying physical proximity we saw previously.
It raises the question, did his psychological needs shift overnight, or did the environment force his hand?
Environmental pressure is the most likely culprit if we assume it is the same killer. By May, the police patrols in Texarkana were unprecedented.
They were everywhere.
The secluded lovers' lanes were practically occupied by law enforcement. We have to consider that his preferred hunting grounds were cut off.
I see.
The Starks farmhouse, while a home, was highly isolated. It might have been a desperate, escalating substitution. His urge to kill was boiling over. His usual avenues were blocked, so he struck at the first vulnerable, isolated target he could find.
Even if it meant sacrificing the close quarters control he preferred.
Exactly. The urge outweighed the preferred method.
Okay, before we get into the public reaction to all this, let's synthesize this algorithm based primarily on those first 3 attacks, which represent the truest expression of his desires.
Good idea.
When we look at the MO, the victim selection is clear. Young couples. The time and location are rigid. Late evenings or weekends, always under the cover of darkness, in secluded rural areas.
Very consistent.
The weapon evolves into a firearm for ultimate, unchallengeable control. But to me, the most terrifying component of his MO is the escape.
Oh, without a doubt.
He vanished from every single crime scene without ever being intercepted. Not once did a patrol car catch his headlights fleeing down a dirt road.
The consistency of those successful escapes is a massive data point. It tells us he wasn't just lucky. He was intimately familiar with his surroundings.
He had to be.
To operate in total darkness in rural areas and slip through closing police perimeters requires a mental map that is incredibly precise. He knew where the blind spots were.
He knew which dirt roads didn't appear on official county maps.
Exactly. He held all the tactical advantages because he weaponized the geography against the authorities.
And he weaponized the darkness against the community. I mean, imagine you are living in Texarkana in the spring of 1946. You're sitting in your living room listening to the radio, and you look out the window.
And it's getting dark.
The sun is starting to set. The historical sources use a specific haunting phrase to describe the atmosphere. Dreading sundown.
It perfectly captures the mood.
The entire town, every single day, watched the light fade and felt a collective, suffocating wave of panic. Hardware stores completely sold out of deadbolts, window locks, and ammunition.
People were terrified.
People are nailing their windows shut in the sweltering Texas heat. The daily routine of an entire society was dismantled by one phantom.
What you are describing is a city's psychological immune system essentially turning on itself. When the night, which is biologically and socially programmed as a time of rest and security, becomes synonymous with an invisible, unpredictable, lethal threat, the social fabric begins to tear.
It just unravels.
The constant state of hyperarousal leads to widespread paranoia. The historical records show this fear led to numerous false confessions, unfounded accusations against neighbors, and vigilante mobs forming.
Wow, mobs.
Yeah, people were so desperate to put a physical face to the phantom that they began destroying their own community from the inside out.
And the law enforcement response was completely paralyzed by this environment. And to understand why, you really have to look at a map.
The geography is key.
Texarkana literally straddles the state line between Texas and Arkansas. So you have the local police for the Texas side, the local police for the Arkansas side, 2 different county sheriff's departments, state troopers from both states.
It's a crowded room.
And eventually the legendary Texas Rangers roll into town. Imagine you are a Texas Ranger arriving on that county line. In 1946, you don't have a centralized digital database.
No internet, no cell phones.
You don't have encrypted radio channels shared across state lines. If an Arkansas deputy finds a bullet casing on a dirt road, it might take days for that physical report to be typed up, mailed, or hand-delivered to a Texas investigator who might be working the other half of the case.
It is an absolute jurisdictional nightmare, and it acted as a massive force multiplier for the killer. Whether the offender consciously studied the jurisdictional boundaries or just instinctively exploited them, the result was the exact same.
He used it to his advantage.
He was operating across invisible lines that created a hopelessly fragmented investigation. No single agency had the complete picture. The police were trying to assemble a puzzle, but half the pieces were locked in a vault in another state.
That is incredibly frustrating.
It perfectly highlights why modern multi-jurisdictional task forces had to be invented. The bureaucracy of 1946 simply could not keep pace with a mobile, intelligent predator.
So the police hit a massive bureaucratic wall. The physical evidence is practically non-existent. No DNA, obviously. The witnesses who survived are traumatized and give conflicting descriptions.
Which is very common in high-stress situations.
And when official investigations hit a vacuum, human nature rushes in to fill it. The public, the media, and decades later, internet sleuths and criminologists step in with behavioral theories.
Exactly. When the who and the where remain frustratingly unanswered, human beings naturally pivot to analyzing the why and the how.
We just have to know.
We have a psychological need to make sense of the senseless. And what is truly remarkable about the Texarkana case is that because the physical evidence was so lacking, it forced everyone to focus entirely on the behavior.
Right.
It serves as a foundational text for how we understand and categorize serial violence today.
If you browse through true crime forums or academic criminology discussions, it is fascinating how often this specific 1946 case is cited as ground zero for modern behavioral profiling.
Oh, it's cited all the time.
Keep in mind, the term serial killer wouldn't even exist for another 30 years. Yet, all the hallmarks are present in the Texarkana attacks. We are essentially taking FBI-style behavioral profiling frameworks from the 1970s and applying them retrospectively to a post-war phantom.
It is a profound exercise in retroactive analysis. We are draping modern psychological architecture over historical raw data. And when we apply those modern lenses, a few very distinct theories emerge to explain the phantom's algorithm.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first, and perhaps most heavily supported by the behavioral data, is the organized offender theory.
Let's define what that actually means, because I think the word organized gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
To a layman, organized just means he planned it. But in FBI profiling terms, it means something much more specific about his cognitive state.
Correct. In modern profiling, the distinction between an organized and a disorganized offender is foundational.
Yeah.
A disorganized offender is often impulsive, acting under the influence of severe mental illness, delusions, or substances. They leave chaotic, messy crime scenes. They attack targets of opportunity. They often leave the weapon at the scene.
It's a total mess.
Exactly. But the phantom killer displays every single hallmark of a highly organized, cognitively sophisticated predator.
Because of the cognitive load required to pull this off.
Precisely. Think about the cognitive bandwidth required to execute these crimes. We see meticulous victim selection. He's hunting for specific demographics in specific locations.
Young couples in parked cars.
We see completely controlled attack environments. He dictates the lighting, the terrain, the timeline. We see planned, flawless escape routes. He brings his own weapons and takes them with him.
He leaves nothing behind.
These behaviors do not suggest a frantic, disorganized mind lashing out. They point to a chilling level of patience, preparation, and psychological control. He is a predator who meticulously sets a trap and waits.
Which flows perfectly into the second major theory, the local resident theory. If this guy is so highly organized and his evasion tactics are so flawless, he absolutely has to know the terrain.
He couldn't do it otherwise.
He is driving unlit, rural dirt roads in 1946. He knows exactly where these highly obscure lovers' lanes are, spots that only teenagers from that specific school district would even know about.
Exactly, local knowledge.
You can't just be a drifter hopping off a train and possess that kind of intimate, granular geographic knowledge.
The science of geographic profiling heavily supports the local resident theory. Let's break down how that actually works.
Okay, please do.
Geographic profiling relies on concepts like anchor points and distance decay. An offender's anchor point is usually their home, their workplace, or a location they frequent daily.
Somewhere they feel safe.
Right. The principle of distance decay dictates that crimes are more likely to occur closer to an offender's anchor point, but outside a specific buffer zone to avoid drawing attention to their own doorstep.
So he's not going to attack his next-door neighbor, but he's not going to drive 4 hours into Oklahoma to do it either.
Precisely. He operates within a specific geographic comfort zone. The The fact that he could repeatedly strike in these dark, isolated areas and disappear before massive, coordinated police patrols could close the net strongly suggests he had an internalized map of the region.
A mental map.
He knew the shortcuts, he knew which roads dead-ended, he knew the county lines. This strongly implies he was someone who blended into the Texarkana community during the day.
Hiding in plain sight.
He could have been the mechanic fixing the police cruisers. He could have been the clerk selling deadbolts to terrified families. His intimate knowledge of the town was his greatest weapon.
It's a deeply unsettling thought that the monster you are hiding from is someone you wave to at the grocery store. And that brings us to a third theory, one deeply tied to the specific era, the military training theory. It's 1946. World War II has just ended. You have millions of young men returning to rural America, and many of them have been fundamentally changed, traumatized, or desensitized by what they experienced overseas.
It's a very complex time.
The speculation focuses on the killer's intense composure under pressure, the tactical use of darkness, and the precise execution-style proficiency with the .32 caliber revolver. It feels almost like a military operation.
I can see why people draw that conclusion.
But I have to push back on this a bit. This is 1946 in rural Texas and Arkansas. Wasn't basically every single adult male a proficient gun owner? Does shooting someone in a parked car really prove military training?
You are highlighting the exact danger of confirmation bias in historical profiling. It is incredibly tempting to look at a post-war timeline and a skilled shooter and draw a straight line to military trauma.
It's a very neat narrative.
It makes for a compelling narrative, yes. Post-war eras certainly do see a complex reintegration of individuals trained in lethal violence. The composure required to calmly execute two people and vanish into the night could align with combat experience.
Sure.
However, your pushback is entirely valid. Firearm proficiency was ubiquitous in that region. Navigating dirt roads at night was a common rural skill, military or not.
Just part of living out there.
While the psychological trauma of war could act as a catalyst for latent violent urges, we have zero concrete behavioral evidence that explicitly mandates military training. It is a plausible hypothesis, but we must be careful not to treat the year 1946 as evidence in itself.
Which brings us to the most controversial and frankly the most bizarre theory of all, the copycat theory. I mentioned earlier how much I struggle with the fourth attack on the Starks farmhouse.
The anomaly again.
The victimology shifts from teenagers to a married couple. The location shifts from an outdoor dirt road to an indoor living room. The method shifts from close-range dominance to shooting through a window from a distance.
It's a jarring change.
Some analysts, a minority, but a very vocal one, argue that media hysteria spawned a completely different killer.
A copycat.
Yeah. The Phantom was on the front page of every local and national paper. Did someone in Texarkana use the overwhelming panic as a smokescreen to settle a personal score or act out their own violent fantasy, knowing the Phantom would get the blame?
The extreme deviation in the Starks attack is the sole reason the copycat theory has oxygen. In behavioral analysis, as we discussed, such a complete fracturing of the MO is exceptionally rare.
Because it means a totally different motivation.
Moving from hunting in cars to a home invasion requires a fundamentally different psychological appetite. The slight variations in survivor descriptions from the earlier attacks also add fuel to this fire.
Right, the descriptions weren't totally identical.
However, when we look at the statistical realities of criminology, the counter-argument is immense. The rarity of serial violence is profound.
It's just not that common.
The statistical probability of two entirely distinct, uncoordinated serial killers operating in the exact same small Twin City geographic area during the exact same 10-week window, utilizing the exact same chaotic environment to evade capture, is astronomically low.
It's like lightning striking the same grain of sand twice.
Exactly. Most modern investigators conclude that the Starks attack was a desperate, panicked escalation by the original offender, driven by the intense police patrols that blocked his preferred hunting grounds, rather than a mathematically improbable second killer.
So we have all these profiles. We have a highly organized local resident, possibly veteran, who adapts when cornered. But profiles eventually have to point to a living, breathing person.
They do.
And in this case, one name absolutely dominated the historical investigation. Ewell Lee Swinney. Let's examine Swinney.
Yeah.
He was a 29-year-old career criminal. He He was a car thief, a counterfeiter, and he had a heavily documented history of violence.
A very long rap sheet.
On paper, he fits the profile of an extremely dangerous mobile individual. But the actual murder case against him was entirely circumstantial.
Completely circumstantial, and from a legal perspective, profoundly problematic. Swinney was thrust into the spotlight almost entirely because of statements made by his wife, Peggy.
Okay, so she turned him in.
Under police interrogation, she provided incredibly granular, detailed confessions linking her husband directly to the Phantom murders. She knew specific, unreleased details about the crime scenes.
Things only the killer would know.
However, her reliability as a witness was notoriously volatile. She would confess, then days later she would completely recant, claiming the police coerced her. Then she would change the details again.
Oh, what a nightmare for the detectives.
Furthermore, under the legal statutes of the time, and frankly, under modern spousal privilege laws, a wife cannot be compelled to testify against her husband.
Right.
An inconsistent, repeatedly recanted confession from a spouse is incredibly weak, arguably inadmissible evidence for a capital murder trial.
So imagine the prosecution's dilemma. They are sitting in a room, absolutely convinced they have the Phantom killer in handcuffs. The nightmare could be over. But they know, legally, they will get slaughtered in a murder trial because of Peggy's unreliability.
They knew they couldn't win.
If he is acquitted, double jeopardy attaches and he walks free forever. So what do? They pivot. They look at his rap sheet and realize he's an extensive car thief.
A very clever pivot.
They secure a conviction for stealing a vehicle, but they utilize a specific legal maneuver. They classify him as a habitual offender, which allows a judge to sentence him to life in prison for a nonviolent property crime.
Life in prison for stealing a car?
Yeah. I want to ask you about the philosophy of this.
Yeah.
Was this a genuine failure of the justice system because they couldn't prove the ultimate crime? Or was this a pragmatic, necessary containment of an apex predator when a murder conviction was practically impossible?
That is the ultimate philosophical crux of the entire Swinney chapter. If you look at it through a rigid, constitutional, legal lens, it is a failure.
Because they couldn't prove it.
The state could not meet the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Ewell Swinney committed the Moonlight murders. But from a pragmatic, utilitarian, public safety standpoint, law enforcement achieved their ultimate directive. The attacks permanently stopped.
As soon as he was locked up.
The moment Swinney was incarcerated, the Phantom vanished. He was contained. Many legal historians view the habitual offender sentence not as a miscarriage of justice regarding the car theft, but as a strategic, desperate workaround by a community pushed to the brink.
They did what they had to do.
They couldn't execute him for the murders, so they used the bureaucratic tools available to ensure he never walked the back roads of Texarkana again. Swinney remained in prison for decades and died in 1994, always maintaining his innocence regarding the Phantom killings.
We've walked through the timeline, the intense public panic, the theories, and the prime suspect. I want to transition now from the speculation to the concrete analysis.
Let's do it.
When we strip away the 1946 media frenzy and the rumors, what behavioral data points actually survive modern scrutiny? What does the evidence undeniably tell us about this Phantom?
When we subject the 1946 case files to contemporary forensic scrutiny, the geographic profiling principles we discussed earlier hold up impeccably.
The borders.
The offender's ability to consistently navigate the jurisdictional borders to exploit law enforcement gaps is undeniable. Whether he sat in a room studying county maps or whether he just intuitively felt where the police presence weakened, he utilized the friction between Texas and Arkansas as a tactical weapon.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
He understood that crossing a dirt road into a new county bought him hours, sometimes days, of investigative delay. That wasn't a lucky accident. It was a deliberate, sophisticated strategy of geographic evasion.
And the second behavioral pattern that undeniably holds up is his weaponization of darkness. It wasn't just a cloak to hide under. It was a psychological tool.
Precisely. Darkness is the ultimate tool of isolation. By approaching victims in secluded areas exclusively at night, he ensured they were entirely cut off from the rest of the world.
They couldn't see him coming.
He removed their ability to perceive incoming threats. He held all the sensory power. The sudden explosive nature of the attacks, shattering a car window in pitch black or appearing silently in a white mask, is designed to overwhelm the victim's nervous system instantly.
To induce sheer panic.
It tells us we are dealing with an individual who likely felt profoundly powerless, inadequate, or marginalized in his daily daylight life. He overcompensated for that daylight inadequacy through extreme, meticulously controlled violence in the dark.
Wow.
He needed to be the absolute master of life and death in those stolen moments.
It's a stark contrast to how a manhunt would operate today. Think about the massive evolution of offender profiling and physical forensics. In 1946, forensic networking was practically medieval by our standards.
Oh, it was a completely different world.
DNA technology did not exist. Blood typing was rudimentary. If the exact same crimes happened tonight, one microscopic fiber from that makeshift pillowcase mask, one invisible drop of touch DNA left on a car door handle, or one ping from a cell phone tower, and the case is solved in 48 hours.
Almost certainly.
But because the 1940s detectives completely lacked those tools, the Texarkana case forces us to look exclusively at the behavioral shadows.
And that enforced reliance on behavior is exactly why this case is so important. In 1946, investigators were heavily dependent on physical evidence and eyewitness accounts,
Which are flawed.
which, in cases of extreme trauma occurring in total darkness, are notoriously unreliable. Today, behavioral profiling allows us to build a robust, three-dimensional psychological model of the offender.
A full picture.
We can understand the how and the why with remarkable, terrifying clarity. We can map his need for control, chart his geographic comfort zones, and trace his violent escalation. But, wow.
I have to challenge this. We have all this psychological architecture. We have the how and the why. But does retrospective profiling actually bring us any closer to the concrete truth?
That's the big question.
Or is it just an educated academic parlor trick when we don't have the physical evidence to anchor it? We are drawing a highly detailed silhouette, but we aren't taking a photograph.
Huh.
Are we just inventing a psychological ghost to replace the physical phantom?
It is a vital grounding question, and it highlights the ultimate unyielding limitation of the entire discipline. Behavioral profiling provides profound structural insight into the mechanics of a crime and the twisted psychology of the offender.
Right.
It can tell a modern task force exactly what kind of person to look for. It can tell them where to focus their geographic search or how a suspect might react under interrogation stress.
It narrows the field.
But behavioral evidence alone cannot put a name to a face. It is not a crystal ball. You cannot arrest a psychological profile.
No, you can't.
You can only arrest a physical person. And without the physical forensics to irrevocably link a specific name, whether it's Ewell Swinney, a traumatized veteran, or a local mechanic, to those specific dirt roads, the profile remains an abstract, theoretical model.
An educated guess.
Which is exactly why the Phantom Killer remains formally unidentified 80 years later.
It's a sobering reality. We've developed all these incredible tools to understand the darkest corners of human psychology. But when you look back at history, sometimes the physical reality just washed away in the rain before we had the technology to capture it. We are left with the shadow, but the person who cast it has slipped away forever.
It is the most eerie reality of forensic history. Long after the physical evidence degrades into dust, long after the tire tracks wash away and the witnesses pass on, the behavioral algorithm of an offender remains frozen in time.
Frozen in the reports.
The meticulous choices they made to construct a mask, to upgrade to a firearm, to exploit a state line, those micro decisions are a permanent, indelible shadow cast by their actions. We can measure that shadow, we can study its shape, we can understand its depths, but without the physical light of undeniable evidence, we can never truly see the face of the one who cast it.
Next time, we examine one of Europe's most heartbreaking unidentified child cases. A little boy found inside a suitcase whose name, family, and story remained unknown for years.